some of our graduates from the prior year get to speak to our current seniors and maybe even some of our juniors who may have logged on to this right now. I think that every year our participants always have some really great experiences to share. We have a sort of a moderated panel discussion that's going to occur, and we will take some questions in the chat. But I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Slate now, our college and career counselor, so she can go ahead and introduce everybody and get our panel discussion started. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Just wanted to, again, thank the panelists, first of all, for being here. These are students who are literally going through it right now. And a year ago today, they were in the same situation that any of our seniors who are logged on are in right now. And so totally feel your pain and understand everything they're going through, especially with the current climate and how things are today, navigating what can be really, trickier for an already kind of tricky process. So we're excited to hear from students that can share their current experiences, and in order to just kind of use and take advantage of all the time that we do have with these 6 students, I do want to get started very quickly. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. I'll mention your names since our boxes might be a little bit different. So I'm first going to have Isha, please introduce yourself, and again, name, school, and whether or not your major, and then whether or not you were hybrid, in person, all virtual. So kick it off, Isha.
Hi, I'm Isha Nagpal. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm studying architecture, and I'm on campus. I actually am still on campus. And it was a mix of hybrid and virtual, but mostly in person, actually, since I'm an architecture major.
All right, Meg.
Hi, I'm Megan Warner. I go to the University of South Carolina. I'm a bio major on the pre-med track, and I was on campus with both in-person and virtual classes.
Thank you, Meg. And Julia?
Hi, I'm Julia, and I go to Washington Lee University. I'm a neuroscience major, and I was on campus, but I had hybrid classes.
Great, thank you. And Penelope?
Hi, I'm Penelope Cass, and I go to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I'm a hospitality major. And I had a hybrid of classes. I only had one in-person class, and the rest were virtual.
Great. And Mia?
Hi, I'm Mia. I go to the University of Texas at Austin. I'm a government major, and I was on campus with a mix of hybrid and virtual classes.
Okay, and last but not least, Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Leon Gonzalez. I go to the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm undeclared currently, but I will be declaring as a creative writing major. I was on campus and technically a hybrid, but all my professors decided that all the classes would be online.
Awesome. Thank you for the brief introductions. And like I said, without further ado, let's dive into some questions and hear from you all. First, we want to start with applying to college, making a decision. So of course, we want to hear about your campus experience and how school has been so far and time after Chatham has been. But first of all, let's take you back to the actual application process, making a final decision. What are some factors that you remember that went into making a final decision? And then we're going to throw in here, given that there were COVID restrictions, were there any resources or things that really helped you make that decision?
A lot of the factors for me that went into deciding once we got those either acceptances or denials, for me was a big part of it was location. So I've lived all over the place, and I've really loved the Carolinas when I lived there. So that was a big part of me wanting to go mostly to an SEC school or an ACC school, if people know what the divisions are, but and but like location was a big thing. And also a lot of it for me, since I am pre-med, I do want to go to medical school. So like getting a scholarship somewhere is really important to me, because you don't want to be in a lot of debt when you're going to school for 8 to 12 years. So location and scholarships were a big part of it for me.
Location was definitely also a big thing for me since I knew I wanted to be near a big city. So Austin was a great option for that. And then something else I was really looking into were the programs for my major, as well as looking ahead to grad school, because at UT Austin, they have a public policy graduate school where undergrads can take classes there, which is something I was really interested in, as well as the honors program, which I'm in there, which I really liked the smaller community of that. So that specific program really stood out to me as somewhere where I'd want to be for the next 4 years.
I have something like kind of tangential to add. When I was looking at colleges, I wanted to be in a big city also, preferably in the Northeast. But I go to school right now in the Blue Ridge Mountains, in the middle of nowhere. And so I think that it's something that's interesting, just to consider and not to kind of confine your options once you get them, because maybe your final options aren't what you were thinking of. But I think in the end, I realized that what I liked most was like a strong community of people, and regardless if that was in a city or a smaller campus. And then also I was really interested in kind of the flexibility of academics, because in high school I kind of liked every subject, and so I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I really liked choosing a school that had like a business program or a science or liberal arts, whatever I really wanted to do. And I wasn't applying to like a specific division, but I was applying to the college and then could choose once I got there.
That's a helpful perspective. Thanks, Julia, to think that, you think you have an idea, and then until you actually get to think a bit more about it and see all of your options, it might change the way you're thinking. Does anyone have anything in particular in regards to making their decision, maybe like a resource, whether it was like virtual tours or reaching out to admission reps that helped you in making decisions since you couldn't necessarily visit campus back in April or May?
I know that I just texted like anyone I could. Like I would reach out to people and just ask like, do you know anyone that goes to the school? Or so I would kind of just get their perspective, because I think that's something that's important to consider is like the student body and kind of just the atmosphere that's on campus. And you really can't get that unless you either visit or you're talking to someone that goes there.
Yeah, I would say that's something that I definitely had a little bit of trouble with, because the main schools I was thinking about going to were actually on the West Coast. And there's not a lot of people in Chatham that end up going to school on the West Coast. So I didn't have a whole lot of people that I could reach out to, especially the schools that I was considering. So for me, I mostly just used like virtual tours and stuff like that to help make my decision.
Awesome, thank you. It's helpful just to hear different tools, and obviously different things work for different people, but I agree, using the virtual tools, and they're even more robust now than they were back in March and April and May. And then Julia, like you said, actual just connecting with people. We have like people like you all on the panel, right? We have alumni ambassadors, so people can connect with students that are at current colleges to speak about what their experience was like. Especially it's nice too when we hear from students like you who understand what Chatham is like, right? And so they can say, like, as a former Chatham student, here I'm doing A, B, C, D, like that kind of stuff. So I think that's definitely helpful. So we're going to kind of dive into a little bit about how things currently are, especially for some of our seniors. So as I'm sure you remember, many of our students, including you here on the panel, apply either early decision or early action to schools. So about this time, we start to get some answers to those applications, whether they be acceptances, denials, or deferrals. And so I wanted to know if anyone had that experience, if they felt comfortable sharing what that was like, whether it's a deferral or a denial, and how you kind of process that and or approach the remainder of your senior year, whether it was, reaching out for a deferral, asking more questions, or maybe moving on and looking at other options available to you.
So I actually got denied from my top school, which was not a good day for me.
Thank you for sharing, Meg. That is a hard thing to say out loud, but it's such a reality. It happens all the time.
Yeah, it was hard at the time to like it was a school I really wanted to go to for as long as I could remember, and it was really hard for me to process that first. But once I kind of processed it all, and I took a step back and I looked at all the other, because I did get into a lot of, that's the only school I got denied from, which it sucks how it worked out. But I mean, I had a plethora of options. I had other options to choose from. So being able to take that step back and actually look at my other options, and even in retrospect, looking back at it now, I can honestly say I don't know if I would have been as happy at that school than I am at my school now. So it sounds cliche, but everything kind of does work out for a reason. And admissions counselors do have a good idea of what they're doing when they deny or defer. And I think it all ended up working out really well. So if you are denied or get deferred, don't be too discouraged, because it'll work out.
I agree. What is for you will not pass you. And sometimes it doesn't always work out the way that we want to see it. But Meg, you seem like you're thriving and things are going well. Anyone else have experience potentially similar, or maybe a deferral experience?
You can go ahead.
Sorry, Mia. I also had the same experience. I get denied from one of my top choices, or deferred first and then denied. So they kind of keep you waiting. But I guess just having an open mind and thinking you applied to so many other schools for a reason. So all those schools on your list hopefully are schools that you really do want to go to. So, and I know Miss Slate, I remember her saying make sure your list is schools that you all envision yourself as. So actually, when you're applying to these schools, consider even if it's your bottom school, would you actually go there? So just having an open mind and realizing that yes, you may have to wait a little longer, but you're going to hear back from all these other schools as well, and don't rule out any other options.
Yeah, I also got deferred and then denied from my top school, and it can definitely be hard this time of year when you're seeing a lot of people get into places they ED'd to and just being done, because there are so many deferrals that come this time of year. But definitely just stick it out. And even if I know a lot of people that got wait lists. I got on a bunch of wait lists. I didn't end up staying on any of them just because I knew if I got in off the wait list, I didn't think I would actually end up going, but that's definitely a great option for some people as well. And it's definitely the kind of thing that you want to get over with as early as possible, but it's definitely worth it just to wait and really see what all of your options are and to be excited about the ones you did get into, because that means they want you there. So.
Great. Go ahead, Julia.
This is just really small, but I think that being a high school senior, it's really hard to kind of think about making a long-term decision. And sometimes it's hard, especially if you had your eyes on a particular school, or even just thinking about name reputations and maybe not wanting to go somewhere that you got into, but it wasn't your ideal school. But just kind of thinking take yourself out of that position and think about at your options and what is going to be actually beneficial for your life 30 years from now. Rather than just being in high school and seeing where everyone else is going.
Yeah, I think Julia got on a really good point actually of the idea of being really overly attached to certain schools, and that's not really a good mindset, I don't think. And especially the prestige attached to certain schools, because I feel a lot of people get more attached to the idea of going to this really great school, a really prestigious school, when it may not be the best choice for you, emotionally or mentally, or school wise, it's just not really meant for you. And to be okay to not go to that school and to be open to other less glittery options, I think that's important.
Yeah, something else to add for the people that really are researching based off rankings or what your school is really focused in on. It certainly is not everything. Looking at niche or some sort of bestcolleges.com sort of website, the college ranking, where it ranks for your specific major, or even just where it ranks in the country, does not mean everything to where you should make your decision, especially because it could have the best program and be in the exact place that you don't want it to be in terms of location, in terms of price range for your family. There's a lot that goes into this decision. And just because you see something in let's say the top 10, it shouldn't really sway your decision towards a yes or a forced yes, instead of really looking at your options.
That's all helpful feedback. Thank you. And I think you're totally right. And Julia, Penelope, Nick, what you mentioned, a top 10 list might look different for Nick. It looks different for Isha, it looks different for Julia, right? And so US News can be a helpful kind of metric to help us kind of understand those things. But we want to think about what the top 10 means to us and our interests, our future thinking, which I know it can be very easy to just think about the now, right? But it is good to be thinking about those future elements and processes. Now, again, for the application process, just one more question. How do you feel parents or guardians if they helped you in making that final decision, if they were part of that process for you, or did you potentially feel like that was something you more so felt like you made that decision on your own? So if anyone could share their experience with having parents, guardians, important members in their family or circle that helped them with that decision, and how did that go for them?
You can go ahead and start.
Oh, okay. So for me, I feel like my parents were definitely really helpful, even just coming up with schools to apply to. I never thought I would go to school in Texas, but they were the ones that suggested I look into UT. So I feel like they were really helpful guiding me, but still letting me make, I guess, the final decision. They were definitely there for advice and weighing my options, but I feel like I still got the freedom of kind of making like the final decision.
So my decision actually came while sitting down with my parents at the dining room. It was important to them, at least, so that we were all in agreement. Just because, like, I'm still their child, they'd like to have like easy access to come and see me or any emergencies or stuff like that. So they were heavy factors. I did get the freedom to apply to any school I kind of wanted to, and I did get to visit them, and they were certainly happy if I liked the school. But when it came down to the decision, I'm at the University of Pittsburgh, and the reality of like COVID and distance from home, it fit perfectly because it's honestly not that far. And they just stress the fact that, like, in case of emergencies, in case of the pandemic, like anything that you would need, not too far, not too close. So it all kind of tied in together.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was pretty lucky in terms of my parents not really caring how far away from home I was. So, like, that never was really a factor in my decision for the process. Honestly, it was kind of a plus. Not that I like particularly wanted to be super far away from home or anything, but it was just something that like I could be in like a different area that I wasn't used to, and I could like experience new things. So yeah, my parents didn't really have like a huge input into where I was going. It's definitely like something that a lot of people like should consider though, especially like if your parents are going to be like paying for school and stuff like that, or like co-signing a loan, they definitely will want to say and like where in the US or even not in the US you're going to be for school. So yeah.
On the topic of like distance from home, I'm not close to my family. My parents live here, but my brother and his fiance actually live an hour and a half from campus. They live in South Carolina as well. So I can say that having a place to go when you're on campus, especially with everything going on right now, just like if things with virtual school get overwhelming or something like that, just having the ability to take a step back and like maybe leave campus for a few days or like just a day just to get out of your head or whatever. That was very helpful for me. And like they have their dogs, so like, and when they got engaged and everything, they would go. So like I'd go dog sit the dog. That was like kind of my excuse to go visit and say hi. But having that outlet was definitely something that was super helpful.
That's great. Thank you. It's good to have everyone's different perspectives because we know that parents and guardians come from this place of care and concern, right? And we want to make sure that we're including those important people in the conversations, but also helpful to see how other peoples and families and those important to them have been involved in the process. Because again, it's not a one size fits all. It depends on each family and what works for them. So let's talk about college, right? Application. Let's move forward from that. We're in college, yay. How do you feel you were prepared for college, let's say from Chatham, like whether it be academically, like what has been something that's been very helpful for you in your transition to college work, college life?
So academically, I can assure all the seniors and juniors that are watching this, you are the maximum prepared. Like Chatham High School, the teachers, the staff, everyone there has done almost everything they can to prepare you for college. And hopefully when you get there, you'll kind of realize like, wow, like I'm kind of ahead of the pack, or right in the place where I want to be. And that's honestly I'm grateful for having that feeling. And I can't speak for everyone, but that's the way I felt. And I'm sure like some panelists will agree with me. And socially as well, you kind of, when you get to college, I feel like you have a grasp of like, let's say who you want to be around or what it is you like strive to pursue with connections. So like all these little factors that you didn't think mattered in high school or you didn't really pay attention to in high school, you will see them like really like in the first few weeks you're in college. But like ultimately I was pretty prepared.
I can definitely agree with that, how especially with all the different options for classes that Chatham offers. So I moved to Chatham halfway through my sophomore year. So coming from a school in Illinois to coming to Chatham, it was a big step for me academically, because the pace in Chatham is faster than other schools. So being able to actually firsthand see how other high schools were taught versus Chatham, and then applying both of those to college, Chatham does almost like not overly prepare you, but it's really good how prepared you are going into college and how you are able to navigate different teaching styles and great writing skills. I've noticed throughout my English courses how there's some kids in college who don't know comma rules. Like it's like those, like all the basics and all like the foundation. Chatham gives you a really strong foundation to go to college.
I would agree with that, like what Nick and Mike have said so far. I do think though, like time management is super important, and college, there is a lot more work. I find at least for my major, it's a lot of like time consuming things like building models or like working. So like managing your time and realizing that things do take longer than you realize. So like I will expect something to only take 2 hours and it'll be like 4 hours later and I'm not done. And just like realizing that like you have the time now, like your classes aren't as long, like you don't have class all day, you get to choose what you want to do with your time. So like realizing where your priorities are, I think is really important. And that's like something I think you'll learn like just as you mature and like as you get to college. Like I definitely struggled with that a little in the beginning. Like, do I want to go hang out with my friends? Do I need to study with people? Do I need to do this alone so I can actually focus? I think just like learning your boundaries and like what you need to get done to make it work for yourself.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Isha on that. Like, I think that Chatham does a really good job of preparing you, like in the like academic way and everything. Like your writing skills are great for most schools, I think, and like all of that. But time management is definitely, especially if I did a lot in high school, struggle with time management and procrastination. That's definitely something that you really need to get on top of for college. Like I definitely while once I started doing my work, it was fine because Chatham prepared me. Actually starting to do the work was the troubling part of it, I would say. I think the biggest thing that helped me was just creating like a really good like firm schedule to stay on top of. And like one thing that helped me do that was I started working like halfway through my semester, and that kept me to a schedule because I had like the same hours every week where I would work and then I would come back and I would do my homework, and then on the weekends I could relax and like hang out with my friends. So yeah, I think that's really important.
To add to what Penelope said, I also had a job. For those of you who knew that I work at Starbucks here in Chatham, I worked in Pittsburgh as well. And that is something that most certainly helps with time management. Even like, cause like you'll get to see that scheduling your classes, it's so much more flexible. Like it's kind of all on your time, which becomes part of building your own schedule and time management. But having a job really has you like structured in. If you have the time for it, I'm not saying you should get one if you don't, but like it's the tiniest things like the regiments, the clubs, like any sort of sport that you play that will really continue that time management building process and make it a lot easier for you when it comes to, okay, when do I have to do this? When do I have to do that?
Yeah, so I was kind of the inverse. So I also work at Starbucks here. So whenever I went to school, I had the option to transfer and I had a store picked out and everything. And then kind of the week before I went to school, I kind of had a moment of maybe I should just adjust. And so once I got to school, I really wanted to focus on time management when it came to school and study hours and everything. So I wanted to make sure I got on a set schedule for like, especially with virtual classes. It was really like my senior year, I saw how hard it was for me to stay on a schedule. And I figured with a job, like with virtual school, it might get a little overwhelming. So for me, I decided not to work when I went to school. And then I just work when I'm home on breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good idea actually, is like wait when you first get to school, like settle in, see if you even have the time, you know, like it's important to really know yourself and know your limits on how much you can like work in a day. Because, you know, if you work like 8 hours in the day and then you come home and you're like way too tired to get any of your schoolwork done, that's not sustainable. And, you know, so you really have to know yourself and know what you can actually do in a day. So I think that like settling in first and, you know, really seeing what you can do is really important at first, at least.
Yeah, time management is definitely an important skill to hone. And as I think Penelope, you said, like, it's just, you have to get started, and that can be the hardest part. But that's an excellent transition to talk about transition. Penelope and Mia in particular, since you both are two of our further students, being in Texas and Nevada, respectively. I would love to hear from you about your experience being so far away from home, and then of course, you know, you could still be a block away from home and still experience homesickness. So for everyone else here too, if you have anything to add for to that piece as well, just the transition from going from class from 7:40 to 2:30 every day, right, and or being in a totally different state. I'd love to hear your transition experiences.
Yeah, so I really liked being super far away from home. It was definitely hard just because of COVID. My parents couldn't come visit me this fall, but I liked just being in a completely different city, completely different environment, somewhere with a lot of people that had completely different experiences than I did growing up. Because I feel like the farther away you go, there's definitely a much different group of people you're around. So I really liked that. Also loved having the warm weather there. Super excited to go back to that. But it is definitely like hard, like having to pack all my stuff up for 2 months, take a plane home. So it definitely is, you have to like be prepared for it for sure. But it really isn't that bad because once you're there, you're so swept up in your classes and meeting new people, doing super fun things that it doesn't really feel like you're that far away. But yeah, if it's something you're interested in, I definitely encourage considering going farther away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mia. I had a great time being very far away from home, actually. I mean, I know it's different for everybody. And like, if you haven't had many experiences being like super far away from home before, it might be a little bit more difficult. But I had a great time. And I would say that, at least in the beginning, I didn't have the best time because of COVID. It was kind of hard to meet new people on campus. I didn't want to put myself in like too many intense social situations where I might get COVID. So, like, I did limit myself a little bit. It depends on what you're comfortable with. But I would say because of that, I was like a little bit sad my first couple weeks at school. But it takes a little bit of time. But once you find a group of people that, you know, you really feel comfortable with and everything, you don't really feel that alone and you don't feel super far away from anybody. And like I FaceTime to my friends from home all the time. I FaceTime my parents like a couple of times, I guess. Um, yeah, and it was great. I think that like, you know, especially living in a place very different from Chatham, I would say Las Vegas is basically the polar opposite of Chatham, but it was an interesting experience, an exciting experience, and I'm excited to go back to the warm weather as well. Yeah, it's something that I would definitely encourage, you know, looking into if you're interested in being kind of far away. I wouldn't be too scared of it, you know. There's a lot of upsides to it.
I have like a small thing to add, and that's I this is something that I considered because like when I came back, and like parents were able to visit at my school, but they couldn't come onto like the campus. But like because we have a town kind of connected, like they could stay in a hotel there, and like we could like meet up with them. Technically, like they didn't like outwardly say that, but every time my parents kind of wanted to come down, I was like, I'm busy, like I don't really have the time, like I want to see you, and like I kind of wish I was home, but like I don't really have the time. And I think that to a certain extent, even if I went to school in maybe like Pennsylvania, I still wouldn't necessarily have the time to even like come home on the weekends. And that's something that when I was applying to schools, my mom was like, oh, like maybe you just want to like be like an hour away, and then like you can like come home whenever you want. But I think that even if I was closer, like I would be so busy, and that I wouldn't have the time to come home really.
Great, thanks for sharing those experiences. And Penelope, thanks for sharing too that like in the beginning it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows, right? I mean, I went to school in New York and I'm from New Jersey, and I was terribly homesick, and that's like 4 hours. So I can't even imagine Nevada. So I appreciate you sharing that, because yeah, sometimes transition and change can be something we really have to swallow and get used to. And I still remember talking to one of my good friends still that I said, wait, you're also sad and like upset too about being away from home? I thought you were super happy. And she's like, I am, but I'm still sad. And you connect and you find those people like you mentioned, Penelope. So we touched a little bit upon it. I do think things will continue to change rapidly on college campuses in regards to the coronavirus. But has anyone if you'd like to share your experience living on campus with these COVID precautions in place, and maybe ways you've still been able to create like a campus feel for your first semester?
So in Pittsburgh, at the start of the semester, they made it very clear that other students will not be able to enter other dorms. So like if you had your own hall, like you could only interact mostly with the people on your floor. They instituted something called a pod week. So you get a set of people that you kind of spend your whole first like week or so with. And then from then on, they just kind of trust you to be safe with the people on your floor, and even more precautious with the people on other floors. They don't restrict that outside of the university, although you had to wear like a mask at all times on campus. You knew, like I went to school with one of my best friends, Haley O'Donnell. I most certainly saw her like when I was at school. We would like go get like lunch or dinner, like, and it doesn't need to be like restricted to the people that you think are always around you. It's of course, like I think Penelope mentioned, like how you have to, like how you're most comfortable, how you feel in social situations. But Pittsburgh handled the cases and the pandemic pretty well, in the sense that they would send you weekly updates of people that like tested positive or that were in isolation. We at one point moved from elevated risk to guard risk because of how well we were doing. And that enabled for things like club sports to be allowed. And I got to play, like I played club soccer, that there was a lot of group, like they could start to meet in person, of course, with masks, but the better your university seemed to like do with it, in comparison to the ones around you, the more open they became. So the pandemic, like, although at first might have seemed very tight, there's a clear like shot at things getting better, and they like handled it like very structurally. So like there shouldn't be much of a problem, at least where I went, in terms of a transition.
Yeah, similar to me. So when I first I actually went to campus early. So the normal move-in, I think, was August 19th, and I moved in August 10th because I went through sorority recruitment. And through that helped me meet a lot of people, just like through recruitment as a whole. And then once you actually join a sorority or like join a different organization, not necessarily Greek life, but just joining organizations, even if it is virtual, it does help you meet people like through Zoom calls. And then you'll like, or like in a group meeting, you'll be like, hey, like we are in the same class. So if you want to get lunch or like go on, like get coffee and study, whatever. And like, it truly does help meet a lot of people when you join other organizations. And like for me, I wanted to get involved in my sorority. So I applied for an officer position. So I'm a community service director for my sorority. So that's even helping me even more so try to find more things to do even around my campus, like community service wise, and like meeting with other organizations. So that's something that was really helpful for me with the transition to college.
Yeah, I'd say I also rushed a sorority, which is a great way for me to meet people, but it's definitely not for everyone. And my roommate didn't rush, and she still was able to meet so many people through other organizations she joined, which was really great. And just not being afraid to go up to people, because everyone's looking for friends, especially at the beginning. One of my really good friends now, we actually met because I was eating dinner outside with a few girls from my dorm, and she had just moved in and she didn't have a roommate. So she just came up and asked if she could sit with us, and we've been friends ever since. So definitely don't be afraid to go up and reach out to people because everyone's looking for friends.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how up to date everyone is on the Nevada like COVID situation. Probably not very, but it's not great. Las Vegas especially is not doing very well in terms of, COVID. And that kind of reflects in the regulations of the school. They're not very intense. And it might make and that's probably, I mean, something to consider if you feel comfortable with the amount of regulations that a school has. Um, but for us, you could have up to 2 other people in your dorm room. And most people had roommates. So you had just one other roommate and you could have 2 other people that did not live in that room with you, but they had to be wearing a mask and social distance 6 feet apart, which is hard in a tiny dorm room. But um, so that was like the main rule for us. And the main way I made friends on campus was through my roommate. She introduced me to a lot of her friends that she had already met on the floor because she had moved in earlier than I had. So she had friends already on the floor that I got to meet and get along with. So I was pretty lucky that I got along with basically everybody on my floor very well. But there are a lot of other things that you can do that, like Meg and Mia talked about joining organizations, sororities, if that's your thing. It wasn't for me, but if you like that, go for it. That's a great way to make friends, and all that. Yeah, just make sure that you're always like staying within your comfort zone, like COVID wise, if it's still like a big thing next semester or next year. I don't know.
Thanks for sharing. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives. Was someone going to say something? Did I interrupt someone?
Yeah, and one last thing that was kind of surprising to me that was a tad different from high school, but I'm sure a lot of you have like experienced it already because you've had classes with former upperclassmen or underclassmen. Depending on what classes you enroll in, there might be like seniors in that class, juniors, like sophomores. I already have upperclassmen friends from what Meg mentioned, where you can just honestly ask somebody to go study or a cup of coffee or so and such. But like, don't think that because you are a freshman at the college that you only have to have freshman connections. Like, you most certainly will meet sophomores, juniors, seniors, and they're a little bit ahead, but practically in the same position that you are, possibly trying to make more connections, finishing up stuff for their major, preparing for stuff for their majors. So do not be scared to reach out to these type of people. They're honestly just as nice as the freshmen might be. So
yeah, great point, Nick. Go ahead, Isha.
I also just wanted to add, like, don't feel like limited by like if you make like one group of friends like your first week of school to like not make more friends or like branch out. Like, I definitely like got really close with my floor and a bunch of people on my floor, and I have like a group of people that I'm like living off campus with next semester, just like from meeting these people on my floor the first week. But I also like was able to make a lot of new friends like in my major once class started, and like people in my English class that aren't in my major. But I would also just like keep into consideration that like even though you've met these people your first week of school and like it may seem like this is it, like just keep reaching out to people and like have an open mind about like the different types of people you meet. And I think just being like overall, like, yes, it can be really intimidating, but like be that person that like says hi. Like I became a really outgoing person, I would say, and like just like push yourself to be like welcoming, because other people are also looking for that. Like, they're just as nervous as you, and like you could be like the start of that, like starts the conversation or initiates it, and just like it could be something good if you just try. So just like have an open mind about that.
I love that. So like not only can college be academically challenging, it could also be challenging you socially, right? To push you to maybe do things you aren't super comfortable with always. And Penelope, I think I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention quickly that a lot of schools have a really cool option of like if you can choose like top options for where you'd like to be roomed. Like my school had like floors dedicated to like certain really popular majors, or like they had like an LGBTQ plus floor. I live on the hospitality major floor, so everybody on my floor is in my major, which is very helpful when it comes to making friends, but is extremely helpful when it comes to studying and asking questions and stuff like that. Just generally getting help from people on your floor about your major is very nice. So I recommend that if that's an option.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like we could talk about like the social side and everything for so long. We could do a whole different panel on it. But we do want to mention a little bit about academics. And so if anyone wanted to share like what their experience with academics, I know we already talked about the fact that you all for the most part felt pretty prepared academically after coming from Chatham, but obviously things are very different. You might have one class on Monday or 5 classes on Wednesday. And so how did that work for you briefly, if you want to explain that, especially if we had a mix of people with virtual and hybrid? You want to share your experiences?
It was an adjustment for sure, from having the same schedule hypothetically every single day. I know we're on a rotating schedule, but having that routine that you're in every single day to adjusting to a day-to-day basis. So like you only have a certain class certain days a week, and then other ones certain days a week. It's not the same it is the same every day, but besides the point. But one thing I did, especially with the mixture of in-person and virtual, is I have like my closet door is like a whiteboard. So I actually wrote out like a week and like did my schedule in the week. So like I would keep up for the first couple of weeks while I'm there and like wouldn't forget things and just sort of keep everything in order. And another thing that really helped when I first got to campus is I walked my schedule before classes started for the days. Like I went and actually found each of my buildings before the first day of classes, because I felt like if I didn't, I would be so lost and late, and it was a whole thing. But that was something that was also super helpful.
I think that so I definitely benefit from going to a small school in this aspect, in that I can get really close to my professors. And so one of the things that is kind of like definitely like a flaw in my case is that I tend to be a perfectionist, like when it comes to like grades and classes. Yeah, and that's not a good thing, I think. But so at the beginning, I was kind of freaking out, like if I had like a German quiz and I would get like a bunch of points off, because I'd be like, I took AP German, like why am I getting this wrong? And so I just took it upon myself to kind of like introduce myself to the teacher on a personal basis, like tell her my concerns and like and just kind of talk to her about like what I should expect and a plan moving forward that's like realistic, and what her perspective is like being a professor at the university, and like what I can do to be like successfully, not in a sense of being like having perfect grades, but really learning the material. And then also my biology class had a really weird kind of setup. It was hybrid, but it was also group work focused. So I kind of hated this class. But I think that it's like the best class I've ever taken in the same sense, because it was like we had 2 weeks of like virtual Zoom lessons. We would learn the biology of like maybe this unit was like mitosis. And then we would have 2 weeks where we get together with an assigned group and we would have this like really in-depth like research project. So whether it was writing like a really long like scientific report, or like making like a professional like presentation, it was really hard because all of our grades for the class were the collective group's grades. So like there wasn't really individual grades, which is really difficult. But I reached out to the professor a lot for that. And I think that made a huge difference. And I do recommend kind of getting to know your professors as much as possible, because my biology professor reached out and invited me into like research in her lab next semester. And I know that wouldn't have become a possibility if I hadn't like developed a personal relationship with her.
Yeah, I guess kind of the opposite of Julia being at a very big school. I had two classes that had probably 200 to 500 students in them, which were both fully virtual, which can make it very hard to just kind of get lost in the background. But even if things are still virtual next fall, all of my professors were very accessible over Zoom for office hours, which is something that was definitely super helpful to take advantage of. Usually the bigger classes also have teaching assistants that you can reach out to if you are nervous about like reaching out to the professors. Even though they're super nice, it can be more comfortable to reach out to someone that's just a grad student in that area, so a little closer in age, which is really helpful for me. One of my classes actually had like teaching assistant sessions every week. It was for econ, which was definitely one of my harder ones for me. So that was really great to both get to meet with the professor in office hours as well as with the teaching assistants. Because even in like super big classes at a big school, it can be easy to kind of feel like no one's really like noticing you. So I definitely recommend trying to reach out to the professors, because even though it's a big class, they do all still really want to get to know you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mia talks about like something really important about reaching out, and I know we talked about how Chatham really does prepare us very well academically for college. Even so, like if you're feeling like you're having like even a little bit of trouble in any of your classes, there's really no shame in reaching out to academic advisors or just like trying to find some help, tutors, anything like that. There's no shame in it. Even if you feel like you're only struggling a little bit and it's manageable, there's really no downside to taking advantage of the resources that most schools offer. And everyone's always really nice about it. And your professors, like Mia said, are always going to be very open to helping you. And there's so many like upperclassmen that are very nice that would love to tutor you and stuff like that and help you out with some of your classes. So I think that's something really important to think about. Just remember there's no shame in asking for help ever. Um, Also, like most of my classes were like not synchronous, like they weren't Zoom meetings. We never had any like mandatory Zoom meetings or anything like that you had to like be online for. A lot of my friends did, I just didn't. So that was like a kind of a struggle for me because there was no set schedule, like I was talking about before, that I had to, be like actively paying attention to. So if you end up taking a lot of classes like that, set your own schedule, set aside time for that specific class where you need to get this amount of work done, or else you're just not going to do it in my case. But yeah, I think that's really helpful.
Something I think Isha would also know, the area, Pittsburgh itself, it's like there's a lot of people in that area, but at the same time, it's like this medium-sized kind of campus because our campuses are actually like connected to each other. But like in the same sense that like what Mia was talking about, where like if you're on like my school's probably on like the medium bigger size, like you might feel like you'll get like lost among so many bodies, but at the same time, like it wasn't really that many. So also on Julia's like perspective, like your professors are probably the biggest resource you'll ever have. They've studied and know their like the subject matter like the back of their hand. So reaching out to them, although they might seem, let's say, intimidating or like they might not seem like the talkative type, the moment you do, you will most certainly not regret it. They will always be there to help you. That's their job. They actually love it when you talk to them. And like a myth that like, well, not a myth, but you get told so many times throughout your high school career that like once you get to college, your professors aren't going to be this and that, and they're going to be all very regimented. I swear they're the nicest people on earth. They are so flexible. If you talk to them, if you explain to them, like let's say if you're going through something, you can't meet this deadline, most of the time they'll be like, okay, like we'll give you a couple more days. Like they will go out of their way almost to help you like do well in the class. I will say something that like I think in the meaning and the structure of like that kind of statement that they tell you like in your years prior to college, it's mostly in terms of like if you don't talk to your professors, like that deadline is strict. Like they're not, like if you're already late with an assignment, they're not going to be like, oh, okay, here's a couple more days. Like most of the time, if you communicate and if you take your time to like reach out to people, teaching assistants, like any sort of resources, like your advisors, academic advisors, they will be understanding and they will most certainly try to help you in that aspect.
That makes sense, Nick. Like if you're showing them respect, they'll show you respect. Makes a lot of sense. Sorry, Penelope, I cut you off a lot.
Yeah. Going off of what Nick said, I would say that like the vast majority of professors are exactly how he described, very understanding, very nice. That was my experience for the most part. You do have to prepare yourself a little bit though for the possibility of one of those very like hardened professors that is not flexible at all. Like I had one of those, very frustrating to deal with. And they really don't take any excuses for extending deadlines and stuff like that. So do prepare yourself a little bit for those guys because they're a little bit tough to deal with. But I would say my main friend is rate your professor before you take on any classes, before you sign up for any classes. Look at that, and you'll be able to see the good professors and the kind of scary ones, and try to avoid the really scary ones because you're definitely going to get a good education, but they're not very forgiving with a lot of things. And as someone that's had a lot of procrastination issues in the past, the forgiving ones are a lot better. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know yourself and the type of learner you are and the things that you may need support-wise or not from different people. Super important. But while we're getting close to 2:30, so I do want to kind of take back a walk down memory lane for our panelists. In looking back on your senior year, which probably feels like 20 years ago, do you wish you did anything differently, whether it be for your, choosing your path after Chatham, your application process, anything? I know I see Meg, I see you thinking. It's a stump of a question. So anything you wish you do differently?
Something you most definitely have to have is just an open mind. Really the saying, and like this is like the corniest thing, I forget who mentioned it earlier, but like things really do work out the way they're supposed to. You're going to end up where you were either supposed to be at some point in time. So in terms of like what I was doing back then, I certainly wish I actually looked at more schools, just because like I kind of restricted myself at the time. I was like, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I was a ranking guy. Like I looked at the ranking of my schools. I was like, these are the best, so I have to apply to them. And I ended up going to, like, because Pitt wasn't my number one, I ended up going to a school that wasn't like, let's say, the top of everything. So having an open mind and not restricting yourself, confining yourself to the number one or the school that you're so certain that you want to go to, like, it's really important because you will end up at a school that you were meant to be at either way. So just always keep an open mind in terms of the application process, the decision process, everything.
Yeah. Another thing that I really wish I knew, like during the application process in my senior year, is like, take a breath, like, and breathe, take a step back, like, enjoy it while you can, because that's one thing for me, like, especially during like the end of my senior year, I feel like I got so sucked into like the college process and adjusting to virtual and all this stuff that like I didn't really have the chance to really take in the time you had in high school. And like, everything's going to work out. Like, I promise you that one quiz grade, that one exam grade is not going to affect you getting into college or not. Or like, don't overthink it. Like, don't think of like the shoulda, coulda, wouldas when it comes to going to college. Like, take a breath, take a step back. Like, it's all going to work out.
Yeah, and I'd say also, like, don't worry too much about what everyone else is doing, because everyone's really on their own journey with the college process. And like, there's some schools that there's probably going to be 20 to 30 people that applied to, and not everyone's going to get in. So don't worry about where everyone else is applying, because the amount of times I came home from school upset because I heard that someone else applied to one of my schools, which doesn't change the process, doesn't change the outcome at all. So definitely not worth your time stressing about something that you have no control over, because there's just going to be a lot of people applying to some of the same schools, and it really is not worth worrying and stressing over it, because it will all work out in the end, even if 50 people applied to your top school. So
I think like also on that note, like have confidence in yourself. Like I didn't apply to as many reach schools that I wanted to. Like thinking back, like I didn't, quite frankly, didn't think I would get into Carnegie Mellon, and like it was the last school I heard back from, and it was my reach school. It was the top school. It was like the dream school that like seemed out of reach. But like have faith in yourself and apply to those schools that like you think are like a little out of reach, like academically wise. But I mean, this depends on your major as well. Like architecture, they look at your portfolio, so it's subjective, so it's like 50-50. But just like believe in yourself and have faith that like you can do it. Like this is your path in your life that you're ultimately deciding. And yes, like other people have a factor in it, but put yourself out there and just do things that like you think will make you happy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like everybody. I think that one of the worst things that you can do at this point in the year is like compare yourself to your classmates and everyone else that you're in school with, because it's completely useless. Like there is nothing that comes from comparing yourself. Like I chose a major that like not many other people did, and like so comparing what schools I was applying to and the schools that I was getting into to everybody else, that's just a completely useless exercise that doesn't help anybody and it means nothing. So don't do that. It's awful. I actually only applied to one school and I got in, and so I went. So I was pretty lucky in that. And I also applied rolling admission, and I think I got my answer back September 9th or something like that, pretty early. So I was lucky that I didn't really stress that much throughout the rest of the year. I just had to like maintain a GPA, so I didn't get my admission like revoked or something. But I was lucky in that. So I know that not everyone else is going to have my experience, but try to have the same mindset that I did, even if you don't really have a reason to. Of just not really worrying too much about anything like that. It's all going to work out. I feel like people put way too much pressure on themselves and on the school to make them happy. Really, any place that you go to, you can make it the place that you want to be at if you really try. If you have the right mindset and you approach it the right way, like any school can be a place where you feel like it's your dream school, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, and just being like as flexible as possible, because I think that this point in which you are probably in like deciding where you're going to go to college is a point where you're going to like set up the ways that in which you react to things like later on as you become an adult, and how like the beginning of your college experience starts. And so I think just taking this out of the college application process is really important. And an experience that I had was that I'm close friends with a recent graduate of Washington and Lee, and occasionally he would text me and just like check in, like, how are you doing? Like, how are your classes going? Because he had gone through the same thing. And I would text him back, like, I'm so stressed. Like, this is terrible. Like, whatever I was complaining about. And every time he would respond and say the same thing. And this isn't very happy, but he would say, life sucks, and then you die. And like, this is a terrible quote, but I think that in its essence, it's like, you are getting a college education, like, and no matter, even if you graduate with a 2.5 GPA, like, you're arriving at the same end goal, and like, you're alive, you're happy, you're hopefully healthy, and like, that's what matters in life. I don't think that the smaller things are so crucial to get hung up about. And I think that regardless where you are in life, I think that it's so important to just have a healthy perspective on things.
I appreciate all of that reflection that you're sharing with us. I agree. I think if anything that we've learned from 2020 in general was that it is important to take a step back, reflect and think about, our priorities, things that are important to us. And that certainly has made an impact on you all, even from the college side of things. So we appreciate you sharing all of these experiences. Like I said, we could talk for hours about all of your individual experiences and talk about the college process. And but I do want to thank you all so much for taking time out of your break, for being here. I know some of you are still traveling back to Chatham, so we so appreciate that you were willing to talk to our current seniors and offer up your wisdom that you've learned over the months, and remembering and being vulnerable about how your experiences were last year. It really helps make things a lot more relatable and really normalize this whole process, which can sometimes seem like a roller coaster, as you all know. And we hope that you have a really good rest of your break. And I know you all will be continuing to be alumni that we can connect with if our students have questions. Like I said, this was recorded, so you might get some follow-up questions since you're famous now. Mr. Walker, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I just want to thank you all so much. That was really great. I thought your answers were really genuine. I thought you gave our seniors and our underclassmen some really good advice. You guys are all doing some amazing things, and I hope to hear from you again soon and hear you progress through your remaining years over at college. Thank you so much.
All right. Did I stop the recording? No, not yet.